Baltimore City school police officer on pace to rack up more than his annual salary in overtime 3 years in a row.
As Project Baltimore's Chris Papps explains, schools approved the money, and sources say the FBI took notice.
This begs an investigation.
Adam Andrzejewski is the founder of OpenTheBooks.com, a government watchdog organization that tracks public spending. And he believes this could be a prime example of misused tax dollars.
Massive spikes in overtime certainly raise red flags.
So you do periodic hall walks?
Lawrence Smith is a Baltimore City school police officer and 7-time state champion head football coach for Dunbar High School. Sources say he's also currently under investigation by the FBI, in part over payroll irregularities. Through a public records request, Project Baltimore obtained this payroll database of Smith's overtime earnings. We can see his overtime hours per paycheck going back to 2019. And what we found is hard to believe. In 2020, Smith earned about $68,000 in overtime, more than his annual salary. We found one paycheck where he logged 116 and a half hours of overtime in 2 weeks. If you average it out, that would mean he worked nearly 8.5 hours of overtime every day for 2 weeks straight. We found between August and September of 2020, Smith recorded 300 hours of overtime over a 6-week period. If you add that to his normal work week, Smith says he was at work on average nearly 13 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 42 straight days, a feat he nearly repeated the following year in 2021, when he logged 297 hours of overtime over a 6-week period between June and July.
To the extent that Lawrence Smith's public employment is for the public good, he should be lauded. What you've outlined here is a troubling pattern.
2021 was a big year for Smith. He made more than any other city school police officer, $30,000 more than the city school's police chief. How did he do it? By bringing home more than $94,000 in overtime. His total earnings that year, nearly $168,000.
That's a tremendous amount for any employee of the Baltimore City Public Schools to be working, just in terms of gross hours.
But Smith didn't always used to work this much overtime. According to city schools, the average school police officer makes about $18,000 a year in overtime. But take a look at this chart. In 2017, 2018, and 2019, Smith earned below the average. But in 2020, his overtime began to skyrocket. So what happened?
What I'll say about Detective Smith is this. He is a unicorn in our police department.
Baltimore City Schools did not provide an explanation for the overtime. But Sergeant Clyde Boatwright, president of the FOP, is not surprised that it's a lot of hours.
He is one of one. He has a responsibility that no one else in our department has.
Boatwright says about 5 years ago, Smith took on more responsibility as a liaison to other police departments.
We got good movement.
He's also the custodian of the camera systems.
So if there's a homicide that occurs near a school, there could be footage where a suspect is seen getting away, a getaway car, a getaway driver, and he is the person that will be looking into those types of situations. Let's get to the cafeteria.
According to Boatwright, Smith's role requires him to be on call 24 hours a day. And with Baltimore's crime rate, the overtime can add up. It also goes through an approval process with multiple supervisors signing off. Do you believe there's enough oversight in the overtime system?
Yes, I do.
But when an employee is making far more than his annual salary in overtime, Andrzejewski questions whether it's the best use of public dollars.
Well, it's a misallocation of public resources. For that kind of money, the public could have had an extra resource officer or two.
He says, at the very least, an audit should be conducted.
Why is one person invested with all of this authority, all of this control, and all of this expertise within the Baltimore City Public Schools? Auditors need to take a look at this situation.
I'm Chris Papps, and this is Project Baltimore.